The Prime Minister says France may have breached the post-Brexit trade agreement in the row over fishing rights. At the G20 summit in Rome, the dispute continues to cause tensions between France and the UK.
There's some turbulence in the region. If one of our partners decides to breach the trade and cooperation agreement that we struck, then obviously that's a matter that we'll have to pursue.
Lawyers for Prince Andrew ask a New York judge to dismiss a civil lawsuit against him. And in the rugby, New Zealand scores 7 tries in a comfortable victory over Wales. Good evening. Leaders of the G20, the world's most powerful economies, have been meeting in Rome today. Climate change has been high on their agenda. From Rome, they'll head to Glasgow for the crucial COP26 summit on how to reduce global warming. But for the UK and France, the row over fishing rights has continued to cause friction. Boris Johnson said today there is turbulence in relations between London and Paris. The French are threatening to block some British boats from their ports next week. From Rome, here's our political editor, Laura Koonsberg.
Old rivalries and fierce fights. Rome's Colosseum has hosted a few. But it's the UK and France this time, both flexing their strength. France threatening to disrupt trade if their boats don't get more access to fish the channel.
Do you think that France is trying to punish the UK with this row over fishing permits?
I think that the things that unite France and the UK are far more important than things that divide us, Laura. And I must say, we are a bit worried that France may be about to become in breach, or is already in breach of the trade and cooperation agreement that we've struck.
I mean, President Macron's going around questioning your credibility. You've been summoning the French ambassador into the Foreign Office in London. I mean, what are you actually going to do about it?
Get on and do the things that matter to both of us, and make sure that we work together on tackling the big issues that face the world. There's some turbulence in the region. If one of our partners decides to breach the trade and cooperation agreement that we struck, then obviously that's a matter that we'll have to pursue.
The Prime Minister may want to play nice with the French President and their other high-ranking friends, but if Macron goes further, that power hug might not last. Boris Johnson's Lieutenant David Frost wrote online that French rhetoric was problematic and troubling, and warned the UK could trigger legal action, a dispute settlement mechanism, before too long. The fist bump isn't yet a dramatic punch-up over channel permits. Boris Johnson has, to use his joke, much bigger fish to fry, getting other wealthy big countries to move faster. India, and especially China. Boris Johnson with his wife Carrie tonight, wanting other leaders to stop and think, to believe that they ought to, they must, give up more cash, give up more carbon.
People are often very conceited about history and about our civilization. We think that we can be on a remorseless forward march when actually we can be actively conniving in our own decline and fall. And what we need to do is to ensure that at the COP summit next week, the world leaders come together.
Are you disappointed with what China has come forward so far?
Look, and they've made progress on overseas financing of coal. That's a good thing. What China, I think, needs to do is to find ways of making a more ambitious, nationally determined.
But they're not going to do that. They've
published
what they've said they're going to do, and it's not enough, is it? You must be disappointed.
Let's see where we can get to.
In September, you rated the chances of success in Glasgow at 6 out of 10. What would you say this morning?
I'd say they're about the same. Look at that.
Boris Johnson hopes he'll make history, brokering an agreement to slow down the warming of the planet.
It is the metaphor. Either COP succeeds or the Dark Ages. That's what I'm saying. Or could be the Dark Ages.
But he's trying to corral many dozens of countries. There is certainly no one emperor who can rule supreme. Laura Koonsberg, BBC News, Rome.
As well as climate change, several G20 leaders, including Boris Johnson and the American President Joe Biden, have been discussing Iran today. They spoke of their grave and growing concern about Iran's nuclear program and urged the Iranian president to change course to avoid a dangerous escalation. Our North America editor John Sopel reports from the summit in Rome.
Good to go. And with that thumbs up from the American president, the biggest gathering of world leaders since COVID arrived could get underway. And everyone's relearning social etiquette. To mask or not to mask, unmask. To shake hands or not, shake. And with everyone back in the same room, the host, the Italian Prime Minister, made a tentative call to order.
I think we can start.
And after so long apart, he urged a renewed commitment to working together.
Multilateralism is the best answer to the problems we face today. In many ways, it's the only possible answer. From the pandemic to climate change to fair and equitable taxation, going it alone, it's simply not an option.
The great set piece of these occasions is the family photo. But then something unexpected happened. The men in white coats arrived. No, not to take them away, but to underline the role that first responders have played since the pandemic took hold, and how to speed up vaccine distribution to the poorest nations. There's also mounting concern about Iran's nuclear program. The leaders of the US, France, Germany and Britain issued a joint statement expressing grave and growing concern. But Boris Johnson's most immediate concern is next week's climate change conference in Scotland. Here he's shaking hands, but also trying to twist arms. The draft communiqué that's been agreed talks about the urgent need to keep global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. But for all the words in this draft communiqué, and there are a lot of them, it's very short on detailed commitments or concrete measures to limit carbon emissions. Boris Johnson is going to have his work cut out in Glasgow next week. And the pressure is growing. In Glasgow, they were on the streets today demanding action. And in Rome too. The world is going to be watching. John Sopel, BBC News, Rome.
Well, let's go live to Rome now and back to Laura Koonsberg. And Laura, a time of really intense international diplomacy, this G20 summit followed by the climate change summit in Glasgow. And yet this fishing row between France and Britain continuing to cause tensions.
Yeah, Ben, it is a diplomatic row that shows no sign of disappearing on a practical level, partly because simply the issue hasn't been resolved. On a political level, rather than it weakening, the strength of feeling on both sides of the channel seems to be deepening and actually becoming more serious. And in terms of that spat between President Macron and Prime Minister Johnson, well, Downing Street doesn't want to try to intensify things. They don't have much interest at the moment in plunging into any new kind of punch-up in the post-Brexit world. But at the same time, they've made quite clear today that as they see it, if France carries on making the kind of threats that they have been making and maybe turning those hypothetical warnings into kind of real action, well, they wouldn't hesitate to try to take the whole thing to the law. But it's also absolutely the case, Ben, that this isn't at the top of Boris Johnson's list at the moment. He's here in Rome to try to get momentum going before the whole diplomatic circus moves home back to the UK with that crucial environmental conference that gets underway within 48 hours in Glasgow now. And if you thought that trying to solve a diplomatic spat on both sides of the channel was a difficult thing, my goodness, wait till you see what it's like trying to stitch together a patchwork of every single country in the world.
Laura, thank you very much. Laura Koonsberg there in Rome. Prince Andrew has asked a New York court to dismiss a civil lawsuit brought against him by Virginia Giuffre, who says he sexually assaulted her when she was 17. Prince Andrew has always denied the claims. His lawyers say Virginia Giuffre is trying to achieve another payday and that her lawsuit is baseless. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell reports.
After months when he's appeared to want to ignore the civil lawsuit brought by Virginia Giuffre, Prince Andrew has now instructed his lawyers to fight to clear his name. The Queen's second son has been accused by Ms Giuffre of sexual abuse when she was 17 years old and thus a minor under US state law. In papers filed in New York last night, the Prince's lawyers have asked a court to dismiss the lawsuit or to require Ms Giuffre to provide a more definitive statement of her allegations. The court papers state, Prince Andrew never sexually abused or assaulted Giuffre. He unequivocally denies Giuffre's false allegations against him. The document goes on, Giuffre has initiated this baseless lawsuit against Prince Andrew to achieve another payday at his expense and at the expense of those closest to him. A second argument advanced by Andrew's lawyers is that Miss Giuffre is not entitled to bring a lawsuit against him. They claim she forfeited that right in 2009 when she sued this man, Jeffrey Epstein, the person who was said to have organised the sex trafficking. Epstein took his own life in prison 2 years ago. Epstein had been a friend of Andrew, but the Prince's lawyers say the 2009 court settlement included a clause which precludes Miss Giuffre from taking any further court action. It will now be for the New York court to decide whether or not the case against the Prince should be dismissed. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
One person has been rescued from a river in Pembrokeshire and taken to hospital after a number of people were reported to be in distress in the water. Coast Guard and ambulance crews joined police and firefighters in the operation in the River Cleddau in Haverfordwest. 4 helicopters were also deployed in the rescue operation. The government's latest coronavirus figures for the UK show there were 41,278 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means that on average there were 40,859 new cases reported per day in the last week. There were 8,983 people in hospital with COVID as of Thursday. 166 deaths were reported. That's people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. And on average in the last week, 157 related deaths were recorded every day. Now, with all the day's sports news, let's go to Ollie Foster, who's at the BBC Sports Centre for us this evening. Hi, Ollie.
Many thanks, Ben. We've had the first of the Rugby Union Autumn International. Scotland overpowered Tonga at Murrayfield, 60 points to 14, but an understrength Wales side was no match for New Zealand in Cardiff. The All Blacks winning that 54-16. Ben Croucher reports.
The Cardiff skyline in contrast to the challenge in front of Wales. Catching New Zealand's All Blacks has long been a problem for Wales, often one step ahead. Beauden Barrett's 100th cap was one to savour. Alan Wynne-Jones's record 149th was not. Already missing a host of key players, now with their leader injured, insult wasn't far behind. Try! New Zealand were rampant, running rings around the red wall. Will Jordan found the flamboyant formula: kick, chase, try. Yep, that works for Wales too. Any faint optimism was quickly quashed. 4 tries followed for an All Blacks at their colourful best. Not helped by injury and availability, Wales were left feeling a little under the weather. Far brighter at Murrayfield, where Scotland treated the returning fans to a 10-try tormenting of Tonga. Rufus McLean scored 2 on his debut. Fellow winger Carl Steyn grabbed 4. They call it Test rugby, but with Australia and South Africa in the next fortnight, tougher tests are to follow. Ben Croucher, BBC News.
Staying with Rugby Union, Leicester Tigers have maintained their 100% start to the Premiership season. The leaders won 55-26 against their great rivals Northampton. That's the Tigers' record win at Saints. Nemani Nadolo went over twice as they made it 7 wins out of 7. There were also wins for Wasps, Bristol and Worcester. There were 7 matches in the Premier League, 4 in the Scottish Premiership today. If you can't wait for Match of the Day or sports scene that follow the news, then stay right there. Chelsea are 3 points clear at the top of the Premier League. Reece James scored 2 of their goals in a 3-0 win at Newcastle. Second place Liverpool drew 2-2 at Anfield against Brighton, and 10-man Manchester City lost 2-0 to Crystal Palace. It was a much-needed win for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as his Manchester United side beat Spurs 3-0. Burnley, Southampton and Arsenal were also winners today. Celtic could have moved to the top of the table in Scotland, but saw an injury time penalty saved as they were held to a goalless draw at home to Livingston. Aberdeen beat Hearts 2-1. St Johnstone won 1-0 at Dundee United, and Dundee beat St Mirren 1-0. England's cricketers are closing in on the T20 World Cup semi-finals. That's after an emphatic 8-wicket victory over Australia to make it 3 wins out of 3 in their group. Joe Linsky reports.
In cricket's unrelenting schedule, there is one standout fixture. This year, England hope Australia bring out the best in them.
What a catch! Chris Wokes!
It often takes the extraordinary to remove Steve Smith. He's the Ashes batsman England have found so hard to get out. But this time, Aussie wickets were easy to find. At one stage, they were 21 for 4 and staggering to the last ball. Australia bowled out for 125. The Winter's Ashes test will look different to this match. T20 cricket is made for batsmen like Jos Buttler, who with one flick of the wrists found the Dubai skies. 5 times he launched a 6 into the stands, 50 runs in just 25 balls.
Butler's in a hurry to get back to the hotel.
This was England at their dominant best. They made the chase with 8 overs to spare. They've now won all 3 World Cup games at a canter, but to do so like this against Australia means that much more. Joe Linsky, BBC News.
South Africa were also winners at the T20 World Cup today. If you head to the cricket pages on the BBC Sport website, you can watch highlights of their game against Sri Lanka. But that's all the sport for now, Ben.
Ollie, many thanks. That's it from us. Greta Thunberg is on the Andrew Marr Show tomorrow morning, and don't forget to put your clocks back. But from me and the team, have a very good night.